The night I ended up in a sterile hospital bed with a bleeding stomach, Isabel was with her first love, checking into the presidential suite of a downtown hotel. When she finally appeared at my bedside the next day, her expression was a mask of cool indifference, as if she were visiting a subordinate who'd caught a minor cold rather than the man she'd been sharing a bed with for 3 years. "Don't be jealous," she said, her voice devoid of any real warmth. "You've always known the kind of man I intend to marry. He has to be my equal." I managed a weak chuckle, the sound scraping against my dry throat. "Isabel, there's no need for politeness between us. We're just bedmates. An explanation isn't necessary." Her expensive dress was slightly wrinkled, and a faint smudge of mascara was visible beneath her eye, the subtle but clear evidence of a night spent away from home. The previous evening should have been a triumph for us. Our company, ZS Group, had just successfully concluded a massive project, and we were celebrating at a 5-star hotel. The event was packed with important figures, including several influential leaders from the city's planning department. I had been making the rounds, ensuring everything went smoothly, but after an hour of forced smiles and small talk, Isabel, the evening's supposed host, was nowhere to be found. My assistant, Sam, approached me with a hesitant look on his face. He quietly informed me that Isabel had booked the hotel's presidential suite and had gone up with a handsome man about 30 minutes prior. I forced myself to maintain my composure, carrying on with my duties for the rest of the night. It wasn't until the last guest had departed that the adrenaline faded, and I was struck by an excruciating pain in my stomach. A single cough brought up a mouthful of blood, sending Sam into a panic. He rushed me to the emergency room, where the doctors diagnosed it as a simple stomach bleed, thankfully nothing more serious. All I needed was rest. Isabel's visit, I suspected, was a mixture of professional obligation to a key employee and a perfunctory nod to our more intimate arrangement. 8 years ago, fresh out of college, I joined ZS Group and quickly became her executive assistant. 5 years into my tenure, after a particularly celebratory night fueled by too much alcohol, we ended up in bed together. An unspoken understanding was born from that night. A convenient, uncomplicated physical relationship. But lately, especially now, it felt utterly pointless. I knew the man she was with was Julian. He was a celebrated fashion designer who had just returned from a long stint abroad. And more importantly, he was Isabel's first love. Back when our arrangement began, we were both unattached, simply satisfying a mutual need. There was nothing to condemn, but with Julian's return, my continued presence felt like an overstayed welcome. In the 3 years we had been sleeping together, Isabel had never once entertained the thought of making our secret public. It was clear I was a convenience, not a partner. High achievers like Isabel are often fiercely proud. She likely operated under the assumption that no matter what transpired, all she had to do was glance over her shoulder, and I would be there, waiting faithfully. Unfortunately for her, in a relationship as transactional as ours, once one person decides it's over, it truly is over. "Isabel, I sent you my resignation last night," I said, my voice steady. "You should check your email." She didn't so much as blink, her face remaining a placid mask. It was obvious she didn't believe me. "Leo, are you jealous? There's no need for that. You know what I require in a husband." I laughed again, a hollow sound this time. "Isabel, let's not pretend this is something it isn't. We're just bedmates. You don't owe me an explanation." She clearly wasn't listening, her gaze drifting past me as if I were a piece of furniture. "Julian just had some business overseas that he needed my help with," she said casually. "Nothing happened last night. You're overthinking it." She saw my resignation not as a final decision, but as a childish tantrum, a way of sulking, but she should have understood that the moment she walked into that suite with him, certain lines were irrevocably crossed. Her flimsy explanations were nothing more than poor attempts to smooth over a crack that had become a chasm. If you never allow yourself to expect anything, you never hand anyone the power to hurt you. That was the mantra I had lived by. I paused, feigning an unwavering composure, and decided to move on. Isabel had grown up swaddled in comfort and privilege. Beyond money and power, there were very few things in the world that she genuinely cared about. Further discussion was futile. After 2 weeks of mandatory rest at home, I returned to the office. The CEO's suite occupied the top floor, boasting a stunning 270-degree panoramic view of the city's sprawling skyline. At precisely 9:25 a.m., I prepared her coffee and checked my watch. Isabel would arrive in 5 minutes. She was always impeccably punctual, a living embodiment of the domineering female CEOs from popular novels. Beautiful, wealthy, poised, and perpetually in control. The only time I had ever seen her disheveled was in the soft light of a bedroom, coaxed by my touch until her defenses crumbled. ZS Group was already the city's largest real estate developer when I joined 8 years ago. Under Isabel's sharp leadership, the company had aggressively expanded into finance, new energy, and other sectors. Business was thriving. Yet few people understood the immense pressure of working for such a formidable woman. If her coffee was prepared incorrectly, the wrong amount of sugar, a slightly off temperature, she wouldn't touch it. I vividly remembered my first day, brewing 10 cups before one finally met her silent nod of approval. Leaving her office, I ran into Sam, who glanced around furtively before leaning in to share the latest office gossip. "I'm hearing that this Julian fellow is really something else. He's got even someone as icy as Isabel wrapped around his little finger." Sam was a natural storyteller, painting a vivid picture as if he'd been a fly on the wall. He recounted a dramatic tale of how their younger, more stubborn selves had allowed a simple misunderstanding to drive them apart. He finished his tale with a scratch of his head, summing it all up with a sigh. "First loves are a killer, man. They can just stand there, do absolutely nothing, and still win." I had to chuckle. There was an undeniable truth to his words. Isabel and I had guarded our secret so well that no one in the company had a clue. Our professional interactions were so sterile they gave no hint of any underlying intimacy. Consequently, Sam felt perfectly comfortable sharing stories of Isabel and Julian directly with me. I had first learned about Julian's existence when I stumbled upon an old photograph of them as teenagers tucked away in one of her drawers. The boy in the photo was breathtaking, smiling under a golden sunset with a dog at his side, while the girl, a younger Isabel, gazed at him with a warmth that radiated from the faded print. The affection between them was palpable. At 9:40 a.m., Isabel finally arrived, a full 10 minutes late, which was highly uncharacteristic. I was about to make a fresh pot of coffee when her internal line buzzed. When I entered her office, I noticed the cup I'd made earlier sat untouched on her desk. "Julian wants to hold a fashion show in Q City, and I've already agreed," she said, her eyes fixed on the newspaper in her hands, her tone strictly business. "I want you to manage the entire event." I never mixed my personal feelings with work, so I responded professionally. "Q City isn't equipped to host a large-scale event like that. The foundational landscape development isn't complete." Isabel's eyes finally lifted from the paper, her gaze sharp, and her patience visibly thinning. "I've made my decision. This is happening. All you need to do is ensure the event proceeds without a hitch and that Julian's creative vision is showcased perfectly." She adjusted the designer glasses on her nose and added with emphasis, "I always keep my work and personal life separate. This is your job. Don't forget your place." She wasn't wrong. An assistant's duty is to fulfill the boss's needs, whatever they may be. But she failed to grasp that I had always been acutely aware of my place and had never once crossed the line. I simply nodded in silence. As I was about to leave, I remembered the coffee that had long since gone cold. I walked back to her desk and, under her surprised gaze, picked up the cup. She grabbed my wrist, and I looked down as she pulled a small jewelry box from her suit pocket. "For you," she said. Inside was a moon-shaped tie clip, its polished surface gleaming softly. It was clearly expensive. "Isabel, you just said we should keep work and personal life separate," I stated, my voice even. "If this is a work-related reward, it should come through the administration department. If it's a personal gift, then I'm afraid I can't accept it." I quietly closed the box, placed it gently back on her desk, and turned to leave. "Are you still upset?" she called after me, a hint of puzzlement in her voice. I looked back at her, my expression calm and distant. I shook my head slowly. "Isabel, I am not your lover. There's no need to try and placate me." Outside her office, I took a deep breath before returning to my desk. The tie clip was from Moon, a small but exclusive brand I was particularly fond of. Once, while accompanying Isabel to select gifts for clients, I had been captivated by a jewelry series themed around the sun and moon. I had stood at the counter, fascinated. After she had paid, she noticed my interest and asked which piece I liked. I admired them all, except for one specific set, a pair of couples' rings, a sun for him and a moon for her, designed to complement each other perfectly. She was right. She could buy me anything else from that collection, but not those rings. I wasn't qualified. So I had just shaken my head and said nothing, quickly forgetting the incident. I hadn't expected her to remember and use it as a tool to appease me now. Such sweet gestures might work on a love-lorn young man, but not on me. A few days later, I was already regretting taking on the fashion show. I had anticipated logistical challenges, but I hadn't expected the most difficult part of the job to be Julian himself. As a designer, he possessed a unique artistic temperament and was painstakingly picky about every single detail. Sam came to me one afternoon, his face grim, reporting that Julian disliked the color of the antique guzheng we had sourced for the stage and wanted it replaced immediately. I was already swamped coordinating materials and setups for his theme, and nearly lost my temper. To accommodate his classical aesthetic, I had called in several personal favors to borrow a highly valuable antique instrument from a renowned private collector. Thanks to years of honing my professional composure, I calmed myself down quickly and decided to speak with Julian directly. As I approached his temporary office, just as I was about to knock, I heard Isabel's voice from inside. "Leo has been with me for years. He's very reliable. You can trust him with every detail." I paused by the door, my desire to enter vanishing. "You rarely praise anyone," Julian's probing voice replied. "Leo must mean a great deal to you." His tone intrigued me. I had always considered myself discreet, so I wondered what he had picked up on. 8 years is long enough for even a dog to learn its owner's temperament." Isabel's tone was flat, completely devoid of emotion, as if she were discussing an inanimate object. Even though I was well aware of my place in her life, the casual cruelty of her words still stung. I turned and walked away, arranging to have the guzheng replaced for Julian without another word. The fashion show was a resounding success. Julian took to the stage in a stunning emerald green velvet suit, captivating the audience. He raised his wine glass in a toast. "I have to thank someone special tonight," he announced, his voice ringing through the venue. "We were separated by foolish misunderstandings and lost time. But now, I want to tell her that I will always be by her side. She deserves all of my love." He proclaimed his passion for all the world to hear. Applause thundered through the room as cameras flashed relentlessly. Under the bright stage lights, a ring on his finger glistened. It was the sun-themed couple's ring from Moon. Only she has the right to wear its partner. A wave of emotion washed over me, and my eyes involuntarily darted to Isabel. Countless curious gazes were fixed on her. She was smiling affectionately. Her usually cold demeanor thawed, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. After 8 years, I could read her mood perfectly. Julian had made this grand announcement without her prior consent. Isabel was a meticulous planner who detested when others acted without her permission. I blinked away the moisture gathering in my eyes, and by the time I looked back, her fleeting displeasure had vanished, replaced by a mask of gentle affection. Julian was different. For him, she made exceptions. I remembered the night our physical relationship began, 3 years ago. I had made a mistake at work, and she had berated me mercilessly. Feeling dejected, I went to a bar to drink, and somehow she found me there. After I had vented my frustrations, we both drank heavily. In the fragmented memories of that night, it was her smile, a rare, unguarded smile that made my mind go blank before I leaned in and kissed her. "Leo, time to clear the backstage!" A staff member's voice snapped me back to the present. I chuckled wryly and got back to work. It was midnight by the time I finished. The venue was in a remote part of the city, and no ride-sharing cars were willing to make the trip. I was aimlessly kicking pebbles by the curb when Isabel's Maserati roared to a stop beside me. Julian rolled down the passenger window, a wide grin on his face. "Hey, can I ask you for a favor? Isabel celebrated a little too hard tonight. She's drunk." "Of course, no problem," I replied. "It helps me out, too." The car was filled with the potent smell of alcohol, mingled with a hint of men's cologne. Isabel was slumped in the back seat, her eyes closed, the top buttons of her shirt undone, and her tie hanging loosely around her neck. She looked completely relaxed. Julian was muttering about her lack of self-control with alcohol, but his hands were gently massaging her temples. They looked as comfortable together as an old married couple. I drove them in silence to Isabel's villa. She was accustomed to living alone. She had a driver and a housekeeper, but neither stayed overnight. Given the late hour, I helped Julian carry her inside. As Isabel lay on the bed, her eyes slightly open and glazed over from the alcohol, Julian began to unbutton her shirt. She suddenly grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "Isabel, come on. Let's get you changed so you can sleep comfortably." He tried to coax her, but she held his wrist firmly, creating an awkward freeze frame. Just then, I re-entered the room with a glass of hot water and saw the scene. Julian quickly regained his composure, smiling at me with a probing look. "Leo, you seem familiar with this place. Do you come here often?" I offered a small, wry smile and shook my head, not wanting to engage. "I've been here a few times to help Isabel with some paperwork." When he seemed ready to press the issue, I cut him off. "Julian, could you look after her? It's getting late and I should be going." I set the glass on the bedside table and turned to leave, but Isabel's fingers suddenly wrapped around mine. "Leo, don't go," she mumbled, as if caught in an unpleasant dream. I gently pried her fingers off, forcing a smile. "Isabel has me confused with someone else. She must be really out of it." Julian's handsome face cracked slightly. He asked sharply, directing the question as much to me as to the semi-conscious woman on the bed. "Who's Leo?" As I left the villa, the night air was refreshingly cool. Walking out under the clear sky helped to clear my head. We had always maintained a professional distance at work. I had known from the moment I first crossed that line with Isabel that there could never be anything real between us. But somewhere along the way, without realizing it, I had fallen for her. I knew it was a one-sided infatuation, nothing more. Yet, Julian's question made me feel an odd sense of guilt, like a lowly thief who had momentarily stolen something that rightfully belonged to him. First thing the next morning, Julian cornered me in the break room. He was taller than me, and his striking good looks were marred by an intense, almost intimidating expression. I had no interest in how their night had concluded, but he must have sensed something was amiss, prompting this confrontation. It felt less like a conversation, and more like an animal marking its territory. "I know you were with Isabel," he began, his brow lifting slightly in a defensive posture. "Women are all the same, especially powerful ones. They play around until they get bored. You've been with her for 8 years. You must know what kind of person she is. You should understand your place and her position, her ambitions, her family. They require someone like me to support her." Julian had hit the nail squarely on the head. He wasn't just a famous fashion designer, he was also the sole heir to the X Group, the beloved son of Mr. Sterling, a financial magnate in Jingcheng. Early on, the X Group had acquired a huge parcel of land by Keeley Lake, precisely where the government was now planning to build a new central business district. Everyone was scrambling for a piece of that action, ZS Group included. "So," he leaned in, searching my face inch by inch. Not finding the distress or humiliation he likely expected, he seemed momentarily surprised before continuing, "I would prefer not to see you at ZS Group anymore." I set my half-made coffee aside, listened to him finish, and then calmly resumed brewing it. "Julian, you misunderstand. With Isabel, it was merely about mutual comfort. There were no emotions involved. I am very clear on that. None of Isabel's affection had ever been mine. If I had ever allowed myself to get carried away, the outcome would have been disastrous for me." I paused, pulling out my phone and showing him an email. "I've already resigned." The break room fell into a brief, tense silence. "I haven't approved your resignation." Isabel's cool voice shattered the quiet. Clad in a sharp business suit, she showed no signs of the previous night's disarray. Julian's eyes lit up, and he quickly moved to her side, affectionately linking his arm with hers. The ring on his finger glinted harshly. "Isabel, what are you doing here so early? It's all my fault about last night." He paused at just the right moment, leaving a world of possibilities to the imagination. Isabel patted his hand reassuringly. "I'll be at the fashion show this afternoon. You should head back for now." After this public display of intimacy, Julian left, looking smug. As he departed, he shot a glance back at me, a silent reminder. Look after her for us. Having wasted so much time, my coffee was now cold. I was forced to brew a fresh cup. Once I was back in her office, Isabel spoke first. "What do you want? A promotion? A raise?" Without looking up from my task, I set the fresh coffee on her desk and replied coolly, "Isabel, I submitted my resignation a month ago. According to labor law, with 1 month's notice, an employee can resign without requiring the employer's approval." Isabel, showing signs of a hangover, rubbed her temples, not really processing my words. "Leo, don't be ridiculous. I just successfully negotiated for some land. You can be the project lead, and I'll double your salary. How about it?" Isabel rarely showed this softer, more conciliatory side. To the outside world, she was decisive, tough, and commanding. But only I knew she hadn't always been this way. The year I joined ZS Group, she had just returned from abroad to inherit the family business. Her grandfather had built the empire from scratch, but he only had one daughter, who, after marrying, gave birth to Isabel. Isabel's mother was a woman obsessed with romance and paid little attention to her daughter. Her grandfather raised her. When Isabel was 10, he passed away. Her parents divorced, and within 2 months her mother remarried a man from humble beginnings named Marcus. He was smart and ambitious, quickly charming Isabel's mother into giving him a position in the company, step by step, he seized control. Isabel held the title of heiress, but no one took her seriously. Marcus, her stepfather, offered no help, instead actively placing obstacles in her path. I was by her side through all of it. I stayed up through countless nights working on business plans, accompanied her to drunken networking dinners, and walked with her through dusty and dirty construction sites. I saw her at her absolute worst, and was there for her greatest triumphs. I knew exactly what she had sacrificed and what she had gained. And yes, I had developed feelings for her. I remember one meeting with a potential female investor. After a few drinks, the lecherous old woman began making unwanted advances toward me, and there was little I could do. Isabel saw it, flew into a rage, and nearly slapped the woman. I had to physically restrain her. Unsurprisingly, we lost that investment. At the time, her position in the company was precarious, with Marcus and other senior managers making her life difficult. That deal had been crucial. Outside the restaurant, she screamed at me for the very first time. "Leo, I am not so desperate that I need you to sell yourself for my sake." Her eyes were red, and her voice was hoarse, but in that moment she was utterly captivating. Eventually, I watched her find her footing, burying those dark, difficult days beneath layers of success and steel. But she never got teary-eyed over me again. So now, it was time for me to leave. "Isabel, can you please sign this?" I pointed to the signature line on my resignation letter, calmly running through her schedule for the day. "Meeting with Mr. Thompson at 10:30 a.m. We were supposed to survey a site this afternoon, but since you want to attend Julian's show, I've rescheduled it for tomorrow morning. Is that acceptable?" Isabel stared at the paper, ignoring my words. I didn't care and pressed on. "Isabel, today is my last day at ZS Group. I'll handle the resignation paperwork this afternoon. I've already handed over all my duties to Sam. He will accompany you to Julian's show." She finally looked up, her expression clearly irritated by my indifferent tone. "Leo, do you really believe I can't manage without you?" I sighed deeply and left her office. I began to pack up my desk. I had accumulated a lot of personal items over the years, but I found I didn't want to take any of it with me. Sam came over, nervously listening for any sounds from the CEO's office before asking me sadly, "Leo, are you really leaving? What about me? You're the only one who can handle her." I chuckled, trying to comfort him. "Isabel isn't a monster. You'll get used to it. Just because you're accustomed to having me around doesn't mean you need me. You'll be fine." The same was true for Isabel. She had grown used to my presence, but she didn't particularly need me. I was well aware of that. Near lunchtime, I received an email from HR. Marcus had arranged a lunch with the chairman of X Group, Mr. Sterling, and wanted Isabel to join. I called Isabel to inform her. She agreed with a cold tone. At noon, Sam drove us to the restaurant in a heavy silence. Isabel remained frigid until we arrived. When I suggested that Sam accompany her inside, she snapped, "Leo, you are still on the clock." So I went in with her. In the private dining room, besides Marcus and some other top managers, Mr. Sterling and Julian were also present. When Julian saw me, he tensed up but quickly plastered on a friendly smile. He affectionately greeted Isabel and guided her to the seat next to him. The other business executives exchanged knowing glances, likely already piecing together the situation. After a few customary rounds of drinks, the conversation turned serious. Mr. Sterling, a man in his 60s dressed sharply in a traditional suit, looked authoritative. He sipped his wine and said, "Marcus, I was initially reluctant to sell the land by the lake." He looked at Isabel with approval, then glanced at his son with a resigned smile. "But Julian sings Isabel's praises to me endlessly. He insists she is the only one who can handle the development properly, so I have decided to let it go. The highly sought-after lakeside property was going to ZS Group. Marcus, a sly and smooth talker, stood up and poured Mr. Sterling another drink, speaking like a doting father. My daughter here can't possibly live up to Julian's high praise. She's still young and needs more experience. She will certainly need your guidance in the future. Within the company, Isabel and Marcus were at constant war, but to the outside world they always presented a united front. I quietly ate my food, noticing Isabel's slight frown and the adoring way Julian gazed at her. Mr. Sterling chuckled, patting his son's hand. Julian has proposed to Isabel. When are you two planning to get married? He looked expectantly at Isabel. Julian seemed nervous, accidentally knocking over his wine glass and spilling its contents everywhere. The minor incident eased the tension in the room. Mr. Sterling looked at his son lovingly and said, "You're about to get married. How can you still be so clumsy? Isabel, I only have one son, so you had better take good care of him, all right?" All eyes in the room turned to Isabel. I put down my chopsticks and looked at her, too. She smiled warmly, her gaze slipping past me and settling on Julian. She spoke with grave seriousness. "Okay?" Amidst the chorus of congratulations, Marcus put on a proud face as he looked at Isabel, but I noticed that his hands, hidden at his sides, were clenched into tight fists. In recent years, Isabel had firmly secured her position in ZS Group, gradually pushing Marcus out of the core decision-making circle. Yet he wasn't ready to give up. He had been trying to fight back, both openly and covertly. They had been fiercely competing over several pieces of land, and now the outcome was finally settled. He had lost. Marcus took a deep sip of wine and then looked up with a polite smile. "It's a wonderful day. Not only have Isabel and Julian set the date for their wedding, but I also have something to announce." He paused for dramatic effect. "Some of you may not know this, but from my previous marriage, I have a son. I have been too busy with work to have him by my side, but he has done very well for himself. After graduating from college, he has made quite a name for himself here at ZS Group. I am very proud of him." Marcus's gaze scanned the room and finally landed on me. My heart sank as he beamed, a smile filled with pride and anticipation, and reached out a hand to me. "Leo, come here to Dad." A stunned silence fell over the room. Julian gasped, "No way!" Everyone finally processed what was happening and stared at me in shock. I calmly stood up and walked toward Marcus. As I passed Isabel, I noticed her composed face, but her eyes were frosty, emanating a heavy, dangerous aura. Mr. Sterling's probing gaze fell on me, and he spoke meaningfully. "Such good fortune, having both your children excel like this." "You flatter me," Marcus replied. "Leo has learned a great deal from Isabel over the years, and is more than capable of handling things on his own now. I plan to have him work under Isabel, taking charge of those new lands around Killy Lake. I'm already halfway to the grave. I just want to enjoy some peace, spending time with my future grandkids. Money can't be earned endlessly. It's better to let the young ones have their shot." To the senior management present, those words sounded like he was finally stepping aside. The look they gave me was a complex mixture of shock and reappraisal. "Leo, go and toast everyone," Marcus instructed me cheerfully. He must have been in a fantastic mood, as he downed several cups in quick succession, his face turning red. I was about to raise my glass when Isabel placed a hand on mine. She said apologetically to the table, "Leo was just discharged from the hospital for a stomach bleed. He can't drink. I'll drink on his behalf. After all, I am his sister." She dragged out the word sister with a heavy emphasis, and I could practically see everyone in the room concocting a dramatic family saga in their minds. Julian shot me a look filled with cold resentment. I gently moved Isabel's hand aside and raised my glass with ease, toasting the room. Thanks to Isabel's guidance, I have learned a great deal over these past 8 years at ZS Group. Who I am related to doesn't truly matter. What is important is that I am setting out on my own path. I have already resigned. Today is my last day at ZS Group, but I hope our paths will cross again in the future. After delivering those polite words, I took a small sip, feeling a grim satisfaction as I watched Marcus's face twist with suppressed anger. The rest of the dinner was charged with unspoken currents. Afterward, Julian quickly led Isabel away. Once everyone else had left, Marcus's anger finally erupted. I brought you into ZS Group to keep an eye on that girl. All these years, you didn't give me a single piece of useful information, and you've even helped her work against me. I am your only father. Everything I have will be yours one day. I am doing all of this for you, and you just up and leave? Do you even understand my intentions? I laughed, meeting his fierce gaze with a calm, cold voice. Heartless and ungrateful? Didn't I learn that from you? You use me, I use you. It seems fair, doesn't it? I doubted Marcus remembered, but the enraged expression on his face now mirrored the one he wore when he stormed out of our house all those years ago. Back then, my mom had just passed away, and he had gotten involved with a wealthy woman. He hardly ever came home. One day I woke up from a nap to find he had taken everything of value from our small apartment, saying he was leaving to find work. I was old enough to understand and clung to his leg, begging him not to go. Enraged, he slapped me across the face, shouting, "Father and son, both stubborn as mules, go live with your aunt. I'm no longer your dad." After that, I was bounced between relatives' houses like a spare part until a kind neighbor took me in. With their help, I managed to finish high school and get into college. Then, Marcus reappeared, claiming he wanted to be my benefactor. His support came with strings attached. He wanted me to work at ZS Group as Isabel's assistant and report back to him on her every move. I refused him in a fit of anger, only to learn later that he had used his new wife to get a foothold in ZS Group and eventually seize control after her death. But when Isabel returned to claim her inheritance, the board was reluctant to hand the company to an outsider. Having squandered his youth, Marcus was unable to father any more children. That's when he remembered he had a son. 6 months later, I was drowning in debt from a failed startup when he came knocking again. This time I agreed. ZS Group was a leading company, and working directly with Isabel presented an incredible learning opportunity. "If you could marry Isabel, I wouldn't contest anything in the company," he had once told me. "After all, wouldn't it all belong to my grandson in the future?" Coming from a humble background, he inherently believed in the superiority of bloodlines. That was why he had always turned a blind eye to my secret relationship with Isabel. Unfortunately for him, his dream was shattered today. "From now on, we go our separate ways," I told him, my voice firm. "You are not my father, and I am not your son." Those words seemed to completely crush him. I turned to leave, but there, standing in the doorway, was Isabel. I saw a storm brewing in her eyes and was unsure how long she had been listening. "Leo, I underestimated you," she said. Her brows were sharp and cold, yet her eyes were frighteningly bright. "Isabel." It was the first time I felt I could call her by her name as an equal. "He is him, and I am me. Sure, he wanted to use me, but I never betrayed you. In these 8 years, I believe my work has been more than worthy of the salary you paid me." "Oh, really?" Isabel suddenly laughed, her lips curling into a sarcastic sneer. "But did you live up to my trust? When you were pleasing me in bed, was your mind just scheming against me? I'm sure Marcus taught you everything he knew. After all, he climbed into his position the same way. Like father, like son." She leaned in, her fingers tracing circles on my cheek. The warmth of her touch was a cruel mask for the chill in her words. "But I am not my mother. I have a clear head. Leo, 3 years ago I found out about your little connection with Marcus. You cozied up to me and I simply played along. There's no harm in playing with something that is offered up so freely. Letting you sleep with me for 3 years with nothing to gain. Leo, aren't you just pathetic and vile? How could you ever compare to Julian? You can't hold a candle to him. Now that he's back, you think you can just walk away unscathed? Dream on. A bone-chilling cold seeped into my limbs. The shock stole my breath, leaving me staring at her in utter disbelief. It turned out that from the very beginning, the joke had been on me. I thought I was the clear-headed one, but after countless internal struggles, I had still managed to lose myself and my heart, step by step. Only Isabel had remained truly clear-headed. She had never loved me, not for a single second. She had been watching me as if I were a character in a comedy for years. Leo, did you forget how I got to where I am, and what happens to those who betray me? You should know very well. Her icy stare slowly sized me up. That plot of land in District S, you leaked the bottom price to Marcus. Her tone was not a question, but a statement of fact. She informed me that the new company that had successfully auctioned off that plot last month had Marcus as its majority shareholder, operating behind the scenes. These past years he'd been stifled by her at ZS Group, so he had quietly started his own company on the side. Save your strength. Don't bother arguing. Only you and I knew the bottom price. I had no knowledge of any of this, but she had already convicted me of betrayal. For money, you would do anything, right? Her gaze, filled with disdain and loathing, thrust me into an icy pit. Slap! Unable to endure it any longer, I shoved her away and delivered a fierce slap across her face. She merely brushed it off with a slight, chilling smile, wiping a trickle of blood from her lip. Her eyes regained their cold glare as she looked at me. I can guarantee that you will not survive in this industry. You'd better switch careers while you still can. Watching her stride away, for the first time in 8 years, I found her truly and utterly repugnant. Isabel was as good as her word. By that afternoon, everyone in the company received an email from HR. I was terminated for severe violations of company rules, and due to a non-compete agreement I had signed, I was barred from working in a similar job at any related company for the next 3 years. In other words, my career in this industry was completely over. Sam was shocked, speechless, at a complete loss for words, unable to comprehend how things had spiraled so dramatically out of control in just a few hours. Amidst a sea of curious and probing gazes, I calmly gathered my few belongings and walked out of the ZS Group building. The weather was uncooperative, as an early spring rain fell incessantly, draping the world in a misty veil. Yet, with each step I took, my resolve grew firmer. Isabel had once said that after 8 years, even a dog should know its owner's temper. But after 8 years, she had never really understood me at all. So much so that half a year later, when she saw me at an industry exchange meeting, her expression was one of rare, genuine surprise. Through the crowded room, her eyes found mine, dark and complex. Julian, following her gaze, looked my way, and, as expected, his face immediately darkened. He guided Isabel over to where I was standing, his brows raised with a note of provocation in his voice. Leo, if I'm not mistaken, you were fired from ZS Group and shouldn't be working in this field for 3 years. And yet here you are, a mere 6 months later. I suppose ZS Group's legal department will be busy. I was about to speak when a clear, confident voice came from behind me. The people we hire at H Group don't require the concern of ZS Group's legal department. Julian's eyes widened as he struggled to maintain his composure. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled slightly. Clara, what are you doing here in Jing City? No wonder he was surprised. H Group, the largest developer in the Southeast, had just entered the Jing City market this year. This formidable new player had immediately put pressure on ZS Group, snapping up several prime parcels of land. Mr. Sterling had even tried to arrange collaborations, only to be politely turned down each time. Clara approached, and I instinctively took a small step back. Isabel raised a subtle eyebrow, her gaze flitting between Clara and me, a dim complexity in her expression. Peter cleared his throat. When he spoke again, his face bore a forced smile. I was just afraid Clara might be deceived. Leo used to be Isabel's assistant. He was fired for misconduct. He paused deliberately, stealing a glance at me before continuing. I won't get into the specifics, but he caused significant financial losses for ZS Group. I just wanted to warn you, Clara. Trust is key when recruiting staff. Clara shook her head with a gentle smile, but her tone was distant. Julian, you've got it wrong. Leo was my junior in school. I know him well enough. Perhaps you've misunderstood something. Leo wasn't my assistant. He is the founder of Bright Moon Design Studio, and he is the expert our H Group specifically hired for our new generation of product development. Julian couldn't even maintain his smile, stammering, Clara, you must be kidding. Clara chuckled and kindly added, Leo is also the keynote speaker for our Smart Living project. He'll be on stage in half an hour. Isabel, who had been a silent observer, finally spoke. She gave me a deep, searching look. Leo, I have really underestimated you. I ignored her completely and went back to the conference room to prepare my presentation. Isabel was likely not pleased about it, because during a break, just as I stepped out of the restroom, she pulled me into an empty meeting room. It was close to evening, and the room was cast in shadows. Through the large glass windows, the sunset painted the sky in bloody streaks. She stood on her toes, her hot breath ghosting across my ear, her voice husky. Leo, how long did it take you to cozy up to a new patron? Is this your way of getting back at me? Don't forget, whatever that woman can give you, I can give you too. I almost burst out laughing. Isabel must have had amnesia, forgetting that just 6 months ago she had personally and ruthlessly pushed me away. All this posturing now was nothing more than her possessiveness rearing its ugly head. The day I was fired, I blocked all of Isabel's contact information. But I still heard plenty about her from Sam. He said she made him brew 20 cups of coffee, none of which were satisfactory, and she ended up smashing the cup in a rage. He said she received multiple calls from inside the company, but she always hung up without a word. He once saw her holding a jewelry box, staring at it for what seemed like ages. He mentioned that she had gotten drunk and kept mumbling my name. Eventually, I got fed up and blocked Sam, too. I knew Isabel was just used to having me around. My departure was like losing a familiar, reliable object. She hated being abandoned. If Isabel had ever truly cared, she would have known that my college major was architectural design. I had been cocky right after graduation, starting a small studio with some classmates. We worked on designs for smaller developers, but we lacked experience and hit roadblocks at every turn, which led to the studio's closure and my subsequent debt. Because of Marcus, I later joined ZS Group. The skills I possess today were learned bit by bit, thanks in large part to the opportunities Isabel gave me. I even pursued a part-time master's degree, spending all my free time studying. I had never given up on my youthful dreams. After 8 years, these experiences gave me the confidence to leave with my head held high and start anew. In some ways, I did owe a part of my success to Isabel. But Clara, she could always trust me completely. She would genuinely praise my creativity, acknowledge my contributions, and appreciate my hard work. She wouldn't look down from a high horse, watching me struggle alone in a one-sided emotional drama until I had exhausted my last bit of affection and eventually left covered in scars. Can you? I asked Isabel, my voice sharp. My words visibly struck her. Her mouth opened as if to retort, but nothing came out. I firmly pushed her aside, taking a deep breath. So, stop with this nonsense. Deep down you know it won't change a thing. Isabel stood frozen, a distant, lost look in her eyes. These 8 years, in your heart, our relationship was just… I interrupted her, my patience gone. Isabel, stop deluding yourself. Even if I told you otherwise, would you cancel your wedding with Julian for me? You wouldn't. What we had means nothing compared to your ambition and your future. No one is foolish enough to turn their back on money. We're adults. Weighing the options is a basic survival skill. Isabel slowly released me, her face crestfallen, her gaze confused. I took the opportunity to push past her, opening the door to leave. Julian was standing right outside, his face distorted with rage, his eyes fierce. Everything happened so suddenly that when he flung his glass of red wine at me, I had no time to dodge. Isabel, you had better have a good explanation. Why are you still tangled up with this man? Julian was furious, all traces of his usual suave demeanor gone. Isabel stepped forward, blocking his path, her usually cool voice now infused with anger. Julian, can you just calm down? Julian looked deeply hurt, glaring at me. Why do you keep haunting us? Do you have no shame going after someone else's woman? I calmly pointed at the surveillance camera mounted on the ceiling above us, hinting, Julian, if you continue with these insults, I won't hesitate to call the police. He was about to say more, but was stopped by Isabel. Julian apologized to Leo. His face turned ghost white with disbelief. Seeing she wouldn't back down, he was too enraged to speak. He gave me one last hard glare and stormed off. Isabel turned back to me, her expression apologetic. I apologize on Julian's behalf. I smirked, signaling her to come closer. A flash of excitement crossed her eyes, and she eagerly bent down to hear me say, the base price for the S-Zone land, aside from you and me, there was a third person who knew. The day Julian had cornered me in the break room was because he had gone into her office and seen that jewelry box. Next to the box was the proposal I had just submitted for the S-Zone land. Being the sharp person she was, Isabel immediately understood the truth, and her face darkened. As we brushed past each other, she grabbed my arm. I will get to the bottom of this and give you an explanation. No need. I turned my head and saw Clara approaching. Come on, the presentation is about to start. Isabel stood there. I knew she watched me for a long time, but this time I didn't look back. I got on stage and gave my presentation. It was a huge success, and the crowd erupted in applause. After all, the layout I had designed boasted a utility rate of 90% and was the first to incorporate small, elevated spaces perfect for first-time homebuyers. Isabel sat in the front row, and I could see the shock in her eyes. For the past 8 years, she had always been the star on stage while I handled everything behind the scenes. After the meeting, Isabel wanted to see me off. I turned and got into Clara's car. In the dim streetlight, her lonely shadow stretched far behind her before being quickly swallowed by the night. I quietly closed the car window. Clara glanced at me, smiled, and said, She's a truly amazing woman, but she's not the right person for you. I laughed too. Yeah, no point wasting time on that. Not long after, Isabel came looking for me. I had already moved, and I had no idea how she found my new address. When I got home from work, she was standing downstairs. Winter had descended upon the city, and she was covered in a thin layer of snow, like a fine dusting of powdered sugar. I had no idea how long she had been waiting there. I looked straight ahead, tightened the collar of my coat, and kept walking. She called out to me softly, Leo, I'm sorry. I wasn't in the mood for her apologies. As I passed her, she grabbed my hand, her voice pleading. Can you give me a chance to make it right? I scoffed. Make it right! How? She pulled a familiar jewelry box from her pocket, but inside wasn't the tie clip. It was a pair of sun and moon rings, sparkling with a full circle of Pav diamonds. She held the rings carefully, as if they were the most precious things in the world. I used to be so focused on expanding ZS Group and fulfilling my grandfather's dying wish that I thought I couldn't afford to care about anything else. But when you left, I finally realized how important you were to me. I know you grew up without a real home, which is why you're so obsessed with designing homes, making them perfect. I want to give you a home too, Leo. Can we start over? Isabel looked at me as if she wanted to tear her own heart out and lay it in the open for me to see clearly. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Isabel, you really are a joke. All those years I treated you with sincerity and you didn't give an ounce of it back. Now you want to beg for sincerity from me? Are you delusional? Do you really think that I, Leo, am just going to wait around for you, coming and going as you please? You've overestimated yourself and grossly underestimated me. I love fiercely, and I hate fiercely. I never go back. Stop dreaming. I jerked my hand away, and the ring box spun through the air, vanishing somewhere in the snow-covered bushes. Isabel stared blankly at the snow, her face pale, as if all the strength had been drained from her body. After a long while, she snapped out of her trance, her eyes red, managing a wry smile. How am I supposed to find it in all this? I walked straight on, hearing her weak, sobbing voice behind me. If I can't find it, does that mean you won't want me anymore? I didn't stop or even slow my pace. That night the snow turned to a cold, biting rain. The wind made the windows rattle in their frames. After a hot shower, I wrapped myself in a robe to close the window and saw Isabel was still downstairs. She was bent over, her bare hands searching desperately in the slushy snow. She looked so pitifully small in the wind and rain. Expressionless, I shut the window and drew the curtains. The next morning when I left for work, she was gone. A few days later, Sam called me, his voice sounding almost submissive. Leo, Isabel has pneumonia from a high fever. She's in the hospital. Could you come see her? She keeps calling your name in her sleep. Well, that's her own fault, I said coldly. From now on, don't tell me anything about her. Sam was still talking when I hung up the phone. I focused entirely on my work, allowing no distractions. I had a massive project to oversee. Julian, it turned out, was not a romantic fool. Noticing Isabel's hesitations and continued obsession with me, he quickly backed out of their engagement. Mr. Sterling cherished his son and was naturally unhappy with Isabel, so all his previous promises of collaboration were off the table. Now, the 7 Mile Lake plot was up for competitive bidding. Clara told me the government had a significant say in the planning for this project, leaving little room for developers to maneuver. The design was the crucial element. If our design proposal was strong enough, we had a very good shot at winning the bid. Money wasn't an issue. Whatever ZS Group could offer, H Group could match. I had been preparing for this for a long time, and was as confident as ever. On the day of the bidding, thanks to our forward-thinking and innovative design, H Group snagged the 7 Mile Lake plot without a hitch. ZS Group's foothold in the city began to crumble, with projected losses in the billions. The celebration that night went on until late. My coworkers got me to drink a few rounds, but never being much of a drinker, I slipped out to the balcony for some fresh air. The wind was fierce and cold. After getting my fill, I turned to go back inside and saw Isabel standing there. "Congratulations, Leo," she said, her voice strained, the pain clear in her eyes. "You're doing even better without me." "No," I corrected her. "It's not about you. You never influenced me. I'm doing better because I stuck to my dreams." Isabel still didn't understand me. She didn't grasp that I was now a bird soaring freely, that I didn't need her love or approval to prove my worth. Goodbye, Isabel. We brushed past each other one last time. The next morning the sun rose, and the light of a new spring shone bright, full of promise. It felt amazing,